Hello, and welcome to Stories from the View, a podcast from the Pleasant View Senior Center in East Longmeadow. On this podcast, we invite East Longmeadow residents to tell us their stories about their lives and events. And today's guest is Dawn Wesbicki Starks. And here's your host, Mary Genowan Kaplan.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning. And good morning, Dawn. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, good morning to you, and thank you for having me.
Fabulous. We are so anxious to hear your story, and I think we'll title it Dawn's Perspective. So, Dawn, tell us your perspective on our lovely town.
Well, I consider myself a townie. I was born in Springfield, Mass. However, my father was stationed down in Texas, and my mother came up to have me, which was a bone of contention because I wanted to be from Texas. At least I did when I was older.
Not prenatally.
Correct. That would have been pretty unique. But so we came up here. Let me back up a bit. So she had me up here. I was born in Springfield. And then we went back to Texas. And I have some memories, but I'm thinking they may be just from me seeing photographs. But the one that sticks out with me the most are armadillos, number one. I was fascinated with them. And number two, the large snakes, because my mother had to kill them all the time. They would congregate up on the washer and dryer and sun themselves. So it was kind of scary. And number three was the first time I saw a horse. So horses were a major part of my life. I had horses from the age of 10 to 40. My first horse I saw in Texarkana was a gray gelding with a straw hat on, and I hugged and kissed the horse's face. I was just a little one, but then my parents were in trouble because since the time I could start talking, all I talked about were horses. I want a horse, I have to have a horse. My best friend and I used to play horses and wear out our jeans out of the knees because we were horses. I had the Breyer horse collection. And my grandfather, who was...
You'll excuse me, I was
Sure.
an urban child.
Yes.
What is a Breyer horse collection?
They are plastic collectible statues of horses. So I still have in my possession probably about 80 of them. Very old school,
Wow.
1970s. They still make them very popular.
Wow.
Collectors alert.
Yes.
Possibilities
They're not
here.
worth a whole lot. Some are, but not a lot, but sentimental value. So we would play horses. And my grandfather, who was my best friend until my age of 6 when he passed away, had promised me that when I turned 10, I would have a horse. He would get me a horse. This happened after I took my piggy bank at age 5, and we lived on Parker Street, which backed up to Bluebird Acres, which was the family farm. My cousins lived down the street, and my uncle was the farmer. And diagonally behind the fields, the Gralias lived, and they had horses. So it was in the middle of winter, and I took my piggy bank, and I walked over there to buy one of their horses.
And how old were you?
About 5. I'm a very determined person. So if I want something by hook or crook, I'm going to figure out a way to get it. So I walked over there, and my grandfather was hot on my heels, and that's when he promised me at age 10. So he bought me a saddle and a bridle. And my dad, who is very creative, he was the owner of Acres Power Equipment. That business had just started then, but he's also an excellent welder, and he's also an artist. He did a statue that stands up at Mount Holyoke College through welding. He made me a saddle rack, a rocking horse, so I could have the saddle and ride it. Long story short, age of 10, we had moved up onto Holly Hill off of Pleasant Street. We had about 5 acres there and a tennis court. So they put loam over the tennis court and built a barn because at age 10, I was driving my parents insane. Now, my mother and my grandfather had both ridden, so there was some of that in the bloodline. Let's see. So as I said, I've had horses. I participated in 4-H in town with Mr. Scott Phillips. Some old timers will recognize his name. Dedicated volunteer. I participated in the horse clubs as well as the dog clubs. And 4-H is a wonderful foundation for public speaking. They have competitions where you speak and you make presentations. So fantastic. As well as flower arranging and that sort of stuff. So I participated in that. I also was a member of the United States Pony Clubs where I competed. I competed there. I also competed in open events and I did horse trials, which is dressage, cross country, and stadium jumping. And you compete in teams, and we went all the way to the New England finals several times. I also became a horse management judge. You're judged, you're inspected every time you compete. And that was kind of my thing. I would get upset if, I remember I got a point taken off because there was dandruff in my horse's mane. And that was the end
Heavens.
of the world.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. And if you ever saw the inside of my house, you would wonder how that happens because I am a messy person. I present well, but I'm messy. And my mother never figured that out. The other highlight was that Princess Diana and Charles's wedding. I was at an event, and they had the big clunky television sets. We had a huge tent, and the stalls were there. And they mounted it up on the poles, 2 TV sets, so we could see it while we were in the barn getting ready to do cross country that day. And I was amazed that no horse or person got electrocuted. Running all these big electrical lines with horses and people didn't make sense to me, but we saw the wedding. So that
Very nice.
yes. So obviously horses were a big factor in my life and provided me with an income for a bit of my life too. I was a horse management judge. I also
And so
taught.
how young were you when you could do this? Horse management, was that like an adult thing? Or?
Yes, you were. They allowed you to start at age 25, but I got in before that rule started, so I was in my early 20s. By the time I was about 25, I went 25, 26. I was judging at nationals, which was fabulous. It was in Virginia. I had a blast. Very small network of people. A lot of rules, regulations, that sort of stuff, but that's kind of my thing.
You're a detail person.
I am. I like to think I'm big picture, but you're right. I am a detail person. And then I ended up teaching also at Mount Holyoke College. So I'll swing to the other part of my life. I was privileged and blessed to grow up in this town. My parents were wonderful. Obviously, they provided me with my dream come true. And I have a sister who also got involved in the horses, and she is a professional in the horse industry and has been her entire life. So Mom was great. She learned how to drive a truck and trailer so that we could go around because Dad was always working. And
Well, I still haven't gotten over her killing the snake, so
Oh,
I
yeah,
believe she can do anything.
She was a very smart person, and again taught me that if you want to accomplish something, there's got to be a way. And so my dad was always working, so she said, and we were driving her nuts. We want to go compete. So she learned how to drive the truck and trailer. And let's see. So I went through the school system, which is excellent and was wonderful during my day. I had a favorite teacher, 6th grade teacher, Mr. Matulowicz, who was fantastic and still to this day my favorite teacher. But there were many other wonderful teachers and great experiences.
What did he teach?
6th grade teacher, so
Oh,
we taught
6th grade,
everything.
yeah.
And I just remember the World War I dioramas we had to do for trench warfare. And we made the trenches. Unfortunately, it got infested by ants. So we had a little catastrophe in the classroom with an ant invasion. But other than that, things were fine. So let's see. I graduated from high school in 1982, and I will let others do the math for that, but it was a while ago. I went to school at the State University of New York in New Paltz.
Hey, me too.
Really?
Yes.
Really? And what was your major?
But elementary education.
It's known for that.
Yeah.
I again drove my parents insane because I switched my major on almost a weekly basis. I went for teaching speech and hearing pathology,
Yes.
but I ended up changing to between English and history, English history, English history. Then I came up with art history, and my mother looked at me and said, no. And then I ended up with history. But it was an interesting experience. I went for 4 years, well, almost. I actually dropped out with 1 semester to go. I had been on the Happy Pappy meal plan and was having a grand old time. And if the classes interested me, I'd get straight A's. If they didn't, C's. And it just didn't hold my interest. So I left and I came back here. And I picked up jobs that really were going nowhere. And I learned a lot. That without my education, I was on the road to nowhere. But that took me a while to get. I also had another life-changing event that really changed my life. And I am a rubella baby. That's part of why my mom came up here to have me. So I didn't realize how bad it was until I found out how bad it was. I was doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing, like riding horses in competitions, and I could never really breathe. A few times I would pass out, but get up,
It was
shake it
only
off.
breathing,
It was
yeah.
only breathing. That
Great to
again
be
is-
young.
Yeah, well, young and stupid. I don't know. I wasn't, though, because I knew the only fix would be open heart surgery. And there was a while there when I was first very young, they didn't know what was wrong with my heart. My parents wisely said, no, we're going to wait and see. They first said I had a hole in my heart and whatever. So it turned out I had pulmonary stenosis, which is the valve between the heart and the lungs is, what would you call it? There's a stenosis means skinny, narrow.
Oh, it was
or
narrowing.
closing.
Okay.
It ended up being 90%, so I was only getting 10%. But I was still doing these crazy things. So in my late 20s, I had the flu. I went to my doctor, and he looks at me and he says, you need to do something about this heart because it's not getting better, it's getting worse. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm functioning. He's like, no, there's new technology out there, and do you want to go to an old guy or a young guy for a cardiologist? So of course I said young guy. And he was wonderful because I was sent to Boston Children's Hospital for I had the first valvuloplasty in this state. I'm not sure about the country, where they put a cath line up and they blow open the valve. And I was able to go to Boston Children's if you are admitted there as a child. So I was very lucky because they had child-sized cath lines that went up in through your veins because I'm not a huge person.
I was gonna
And they
say,
can hurt. They can hurt. Didn't hurt. I was awake through my entire procedure. That's the little control freak. They said, do you want to be asleep or awake? I'm like, oh, I want to know what you're
And
doing.
how old were you?
At that time, I was, I'm going to say 27. So I was
Still brave, though.
no.
I wanna be
was,
awake.
I was, yeah. I was excited about it, and I
Me
was.
neither. I would, nope, put me out.
No, I have an
I
interest
had
in things.
blood work this morning, and I closed my eyes,
no.
but that's okay.
No, so with the horses and all, I'm used to blood guts. Doesn't bother me at all. But I was cracking jokes apparently because you are loosey goosey. You take a couple of Valium before you even walk in the door. So it was great. Opened and changed my life. I was now able to do things physically without being exerted. I decided to go back to college, this time on my dime, and let me tell you what a difference that makes. I was
The
serious.
Happy Pappy program was over.
Gone. So I was very serious about that, and I did well. I also, during that time, met my husband at Fat Cat Cafe, and it took me 3 dates before I decided I liked him. Obviously,
but you
it
went
worked.
on 3.
I went on 3. I didn't want to go on any, but one of my friends was like, you need to get going. You're 28 now and time's ticking. And the time never stuck in my head. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go on a date with him. So we got married. Is one funny story. When I introduced Sid, my husband, to my parents, my mother decided to cook dinner. Now, my mother was a fantastic cook. So she decides to cook pork roast. Well, we got sitting around having some cocktails and talking and having a good time. We sit down to dinner, and this thing you couldn't cut it with a hacksaw. It was so dry. So she came and she apologized. She's like, I don't know what it was. And I'm thinking, it was 3 martinis we had, We had a good time. Anyhow, we got married at my house, my parents' house, and it was a lovely wedding. We then moved to Louisville, Kentucky. That was not a good fit for us. Within 6 months, I came back. I had a phone call. I needed to come back and work at my dad's store because I used to do a lot of the bookkeeping and things were not being kept. So I came back and I picked that job up and 3 other jobs, all in the horse industry. So I had half a day off every week, which I would just sleep. But I was able to, I lived in my old bedroom, socked away money, and we were able to save some money. Sid drove up with the cat, which was my wedding present from him, who meowed the entire way up, and our dog. And of course, I didn't have a place for us to live yet the day before he comes up. So I'm in a panic. Called, many of you will know Dan Burak, who owns many properties. I call him up, and he's like, yeah, I've got a place for you off Paul Avenue. So we lived there. That was our first place. As I said, I worked the 4 jobs probably for about 2 years. But that first year, I said, we're socking money away. We are moving to a house. And we did. We settled in East Longmeadow. We live in an antique, which we both love very much. And I quit my 3 jobs up at Mount Holyoke teaching riding and went full-time at Acres Power Equipment. Stayed there for a long time. Joined the Chamber of Commerce. Had 2 mentors, Foy Miller and Leveda Munoz, who are lifelong friends and gave me great advice. I became president of that. I joined Rotary Club, which is a phenomenal organization, and most of my closest friends here in town now as an adult are from that club. It's a place, Mary, you know most of the people. You can call if you're in trouble or whatever, and they are there. They're gold.
Right.
I also got involved a little bit in politics, where this town was changing rapidly. It's still changing rapidly. I always said this town is the, quote, it town. We're the bedroom community where business, residential, and industry come together. And we're growing. And this was back in the mid-teens. And a group of us felt that the current form of government then, the Board of Selectmen and town meeting, were not serving the needs of the people. Less than 2% of people would show up at town meeting. So we collected signatures. We got 1,600 signatures, and we put it on the ballot. And I ran for Charter Commission. I was on it, and I was elected chair, which was a challenge, but a fantastic learning experience. We met weekly, sometimes more than weekly, and as you know, in town government, you have to meet all kinds of deadlines. I had to deal with the press, which was a whole new thing. Had to write. I wrote a lot of stuff for the town, and some of it is still in the charter. We learned a lot about writing bylaws and laws.
A million regulations.
Yes, it
I
was.
sat in on a couple of meetings, and it's I would
overwhelming.
say
if you don't know.
mind-boggling, but maybe mind-numbing is a better, because there's just so much.
There was a lot, but we had fantastic, intelligent people great skill set. Everyone had their own little thing. We all played very well together. There was a lot of point counterpoint, which was excellent because you need all viewpoints. So I participated in that. I also was a longtime member of the Appropriations Committee, and now I just came off of the Finance Oversight Committee, which has to do with the town budget, which is a pretty big deal.
How much? Oh no, I'm going to be in
What?
trouble. I'm sorry. How large is our town budget?
We're about 69 million.
It's a lot of zeros.
It's a lot of zeros. We're a large corporation if you think about it, and we're in the service industry. It's all about people, training our people, supporting our citizens. But not everyone pays attention until it hits their tax bill, and then it's what's going on. I encourage people to become involved. That's the only way you're going to learn about anything. And you make great friends, and there's a great support system in this town. It's really a great, great town. And then my latest chapter, we closed Acres Power Equipment after 53 years. Today, technically, is my last day. Takes a while to close everything down. And then I'm going to take a little breather, write my resume, catch up on some housework, and we'll see where it goes from there.
I'm exhausted.
I know I talked a mile a minute.
No, absolutely. How exciting, though. You've seen so many changes and helped to drive additional changes in our town. And even the foresight to see about a growing community that's led by 3 part-time select people, needing a more professional
And hands-on all the time.
more oversight, or I don't even know the word, but 69 million is a lot of dollars. So where do you see our town going? What's happening?
I see us growing. I will say, I think I would love to see the state step up more. We have a lot of money. There's excess capacity there at the state. However, 2 things strike me right here, right now. We've got school, and not just school, but we've got some aging infrastructure all around.
Right, it's not just the high school.
No, it's also 2 elderly elementary schools that are wonderful, but they're coming down the pike too. And the state does not contribute, in my mind, a whole lot of money. I believe it's 1% of the sales tax, I think it is. That's not that much, although, and it's dependent on a stream of revenue that can fluctuate too. The other thing that I just learned was that the state has not changed their contribution to our Chapter 90 funds, which are our roads and bridges. So we all know in this state we have many deficient bridges, which is kind of scary. We also, as we drive around in town, we know they are not good. The cost of paving has gone out of sight. COVID has driven a lot, supply chain issues, and inflation. So we know that. But when the state has not increased our money since, I believe Mary McNally said 2011 or 12, that is, to me, egregious. And she has said that we're not alone. Obviously, we've gone to other towns that need work as well, and that our representatives at the state are just not listening.
So are you saying all of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts are stuck in 211 funding for Chapter 90, or just certain ones?
I honestly don't know that.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
They'll have to research that.
Yeah, because, oftentimes cities get a lion's share of
Right,
things.
because they're more people.
But we have a lot of state roads. I live on one, Route 21, Elm Street. We fought for years to get a repaving, and want to hear the weird thing, which has changed. So way back when, the state, through their regulations, would not allow you to mill and reuse the pavement. For those who don't know, milling means you take the pavement up, you grind it, you make it into fresh pavement
And you
again, you
reclaim
relay
it. Yeah.
Exactly,
Ah,
which makes
our
sense.
own little recycling program.
Yes,
Nice.
and it is very cost effective. State regs years ago wouldn't let you do that. Okay, so it changed. We finally got funding for that, but it's a state road. We've got a lot of our main arteries are state roads. North Main, I know we're getting grants for that, but that's not going to kick in for a while, and it's not going to pave the whole thing. I don't think we'll ever be able to catch up without winning the lottery or something, or having, we use some ARPA funds, which are wonderful. I see Springfield's got them, but they've got mega ARPA funds. We're done with ours, and we've got a few hanging, I don't want to use the word hanging chads, but a few hanging chads out there. And so we'll spend that, but again, paving in our infrastructure, that's where it's at for me.
And that's something that affects every single one of us because we all have to travel from point A to point B.
Yes,
And that's also an issue that our residents can
yeah.
appreciate and see the problems with.
Yeah, and I think for infrastructure, not just on the streets and roadways, but on our buildings, we have an obligation as a town to make sure they are safe. Not saying that they're unsafe, but it costs money, upkeep, and I believe the figure is $27 million to upgrade all of our streets. And there is a reason and a method to what streets get done when because of the infrastructure. So we're worried about our above ground infrastructure. Think about the 100-year-old pipes
All
down
those
below.
pipes
Yeah.
underneath
So,
there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're up against it, but we'll figure it out.
I trust we will.
We have no choice.
We have no choice.
We have no
well,
choice.
Ignoring it is just layering more problems on top
Yeah.
of that. You can't pay now or pay later.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
need to-
Probably pay more later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who would have ever guessed what happened with prices
Yeah.
for everything?
Oh, I'm sure your
know.
business suffered with that.
Yeah, well, our biggest issue, and I think most retailers had that, was the supply chain. It was beyond broken, and there was no quick fix. And when you're not in control of it, it's very frustrating. And so that was a unique time, COVID, to be in business. We were lucky enough, I'm saying that with a question mark, to be named an essential service. So we stayed open through it out. And I had a fantastic crew. Every morning they were come to work and let's go, let's do it. But it was hard. People didn't react well to COVID regulations, I think. Expectations of people changed. The whole workspace, everything. The world has changed. It's different. We need to recalibrate and figure new ways of doing things. And change is hard.
So do you think the future is bright for our It town?
I do. I think we need good stewardship. And that, I will hope, comes from our residents who see a future and want to have a voice in what is our town going to look like. Most towns grow up and they're haphazard. We have good zoning and those type of regulations, but there's always some chafing there because we have residential right up against industrial or against commercial and retail. So there's got to be a give and take. And what's the future? The big thing I hear from not only in-town residents but out of town, the Rotary. Well, I think we fixed it. It's much safer and much better than it was. But other than a complete miracle, I don't see that getting better.
I grew up in Worcester, and we have something called Kelly Square,
Oh, yes.
which used to be
crazy.
Rotary times 3.
Yes.
And it didn't have the bad rap that our little Rotary has. And no one would say, oh, I tried to avoid Kelly Square. You just, as
Yeah.
my husband would say, closed your eyes and
Go
drove
for
through it.
Exactly. Which most of us, we can navigate it.
But I wish we would stop the harping on it.
Well,
There are people who will go out of their way to drive around it. Good for them. This is America. You want to take a few extra streets, go
yes,
for
it's
it.
their choice. Absolutely.
And we're not going to do a little dig tunnel underneath it to avoid it. We're not going to do
Overhead,
What do you
fly
call those
over.
things? Fly over to get
At the
over it.
Rotary, yeah.
Yeah, it's
well, we'd
not gonna
land
happen.
in Ripley's Believe It or Not again if we did that. I
Yeah, I'm
So
sure.
tell me, were we in Ripley's Believe It or
We
Not
are.
Far Road?
Yes. For
Again.
not have 7 intersecting roads without a stoplight. Now we have stop signs, which have made it very good. And
Especially for those people that obey them.
yes, yes.
most
This is
helpful.
always a
Right.
plus. We've all seen some who fly through them, but it's a challenge. But when you've grown up driving it, it isn't. And I will say this: when you see an out of state plate and they're going through backwards or ups or straight lines,
Yeah.
everyone is good and they just stop.
Right.
Let them go through because they are lost and they're probably freaking out
Yeah.
because the GPS doesn't make any sense.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
kinda
know
does.
how to
No,
do this.
it doesn't. It's very confusing for it. So I understand that. But it makes our town unique. And to your point, we can't change the actual road in there, I don't think. Maybe. I had someone tell me who was from Belchertown, and he said, well, you live in East Long Meadow. And I said, yes, I do. He said, I have an answer for your rotary. But we got cut off before I could find out what the answer was. Because I want to know.
Oh, inquiring minds want to know.
I do. What's going on there?
Well, there is a local singing group, musical group, that is now called Seven Roads.
Yes.
And I love their logo because it's the Seven Roads. So I'm embracing that. I think we just have to be proud of it.
Yes.
We have the Rotary and we've lived, so good for us. Yay.
What a badge of courage. We survived the Rotary. We should market it and put it on T-shirts, and then maybe we could pay
Yeah.
for some paving.
Exactly. I don't know how much paving costs, though. We'll see.
A lot of money.
Dawn, thank you so, so much for coming to speak with us today, tell us your story and your perspective on our wonderful town. Do you have any parting words of wisdom? You can say no, or you can
No, it's been
from your...
my pleasure being here, and words of wisdom. Well, just keep plugging away. That's all.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're here in the It Town, and we should be happy to be here.
Right, right. Proud residents of East Long Meadow.
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Dawn. That wraps up another episode of Stories from the View. We'd like to thank Dawn Wisbicki Starks for being here today. The Stories from the View podcast is available on the LCAT 01028 channel on YouTube. If you have a story that you'd like to share on our program, contact Pleasant View Senior Center Director Aaron Kobler by stopping by the Senior Center or by calling Aaron at 525-5436, extension 1401, or you can send Aaron an email, aaron.kobler@eastlongmeadowma.gov. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Stories from the View.